Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Solo ReacTalk. This morning, I'm going to be. I can't call it a reaction anymore because I reacted to this video yesterday, and the video didn't have audio. When I was talking, there was nothing on the video in terms of audio. So I have to restart it again, and I'm going to be watching, not reacting, but watching the Homebrew of the Week, episode 284, Drakken Harbingers, on the 40k Theories YouTube channel. Yeah, I'm sorry about this, guys. I should have checked before, you know, exporting the video and downloading it onto YouTube. I should have. I was so confident that everything was fine. I just have to put in the intro and outro music, and I'm done. And I'll just send it into YouTube. Until I started hearing that there was no sound in some parts of the video, and that's where I'm talking. So, yeah, I'm back here again. So there will be some things that I probably will be talking about that I already know beforehand in terms of the video. So if you guys don't want to watch this reaction, it's okay. Or watching video, it's okay. um, I'm sorry about this, Heldrake 77777. But yeah, I'm going to complete this request and let us start. Remember, guys, if you guys want to check out my previous reaction to Rejecting Change, Honor Over Submission, Warhammer 40k Lore Exploration, made on the Dasrat YouTube channel, which is in relation to Homebrew of the Week, episode 284. Remember that the video, you'll find it in the Warhammer 40k content created by YouTubers reaction playlist at the top right here. Yes. And let us complete this double hitter request from Heldrake 77777. All right. 3, 2, 1, go.
The Drakken Harbingers are a fleet-based chapter descended from the Salamanders who specialize in suppressing numerically superior enemy forces, shock assault, and combating the forces of chaos, particularly traitor Astartes.
I did state that I found it quite interesting that, the Drakken Harbingers are a fleet-based chapter, meaning they're extremely mobile. They don't stay in one place for too long. And we kind of saw that happening in Rejecting Change, Honor Over Submission video made on the Dasrat YouTube channel, where the Drakken Harbingers were going from one theater of war to the next theater of war, and the custodian Colarian, as well as the Primaris Marines that he was going to hand over to the Drakken Harbingers, they found it a bit difficult to chase after the Drakken Harbingers because they're so mobile, they're so fast. They just complete a mission and they head over to the next mission so fast. So yeah, really extremely mobile, easy to call up for any threat that's appearing anywhere in the galaxy, and they are reliable.
Similarly to their brothers from the former 18th, the Drakken Harbingers are not fully codex compliant.
Yep. They're not. They're definitely not. But like I've stated before in Rejecting Change, Honor Over Submission, I have stated that there would be some Inquisition officers or members of the Inquisition who would look over the fact that they are not codex compliant and still use them because they are loyal. That's the only thing they have on them, that they're loyal. Yes, they're effective. Yes, they are capable. However, they are not codex compliant. That's a big hurdle to jump over. And you only need one. You only need one thing. You need to be loyal. And they're loyal.
They are incredibly self-sufficient, trained to forge and maintain their own war gear, and put great emphasis on protecting the common people of the Imperium. Where the two differ, however, is the status of their gene seed, aspects of extremity regarding their adherence or lack thereof to the Codex Astartes, and interpretation of their Primarch Vulcan's teachings. To them, Vulcan's fire is not a mere pyre around which the masses of humanity to huddle in fear of the surrounding void, but the Emperor's very gift of hatred to mankind, meant to sweep across the cosmos and incinerate any enemy that would seek to oppose his people. Due to this, they perceive the modern incarnation of their founding chapter as weak and inefficient, which caused their initial splintering into separate entities.
A schism.
Among their cousins, they respect all who remain dedicated to the Emperor and the Imperium, but hold notably higher regard for the bloodlines of the White Scars, the Imperial Fists, particularly the Black Templars, and especially the Blood Angels.
Yeah, the Blood Angels and the Drakken Harbingers share something quite similar in terms of the Abyssal Hate and the Black Rage. So, they have that sort of connection there. And they have to keep it a secret, especially from the Imperium of Man, from the Inquisition, from the other chapters of Astartes and the Adeptus Ministorum and whoever else would be having prying eyes about the successes of the Drakken Harbingers or the Blood Angels. The fact that they have this abnormality in them.
Further deviation can be found in their structure and doctrines. Unlike other chapters, the Drakken Harbingers almost always traverse the galaxy in full force, actively seeking out theaters of war into which to spear their strength. On rare occasions, though, a splinter group may form among them in order to pursue a goal that does not require the full chapter's involvement. Internally, the chapter does not officially delegate any companies, squads, or other firm subdivisions besides rank. The base being the rank and-file Battle Brothers, above them the chapter veterans, from whose ranks stem the chaplaincy, apothecariate, ancients and tech marines, followed by the chapter's champions, who carry into battle the relics of the chapter and fulfill the equivalent duties of company captains, and, above them, the praetor, the equivalent to a chapter master, appointed to the position by the Council of the Champions. Their leader bears that title as the Drakken shun and reject the notion of chapterhood, instead seeing themselves as the last true inheritors of the Legion of old.
They will defy Robuta Gilliman to the end. They will defy the Codex Astartes to the end. They will not follow the... What is it that they called him again? The last one? Yeah, I think they call Robuta Gilliman the last one. They won't follow the last one's decrees or orders, no matter what. They'll only follow Vulcan and the Emperor.
In addition to their smithing skills, all of the Battle Brothers are universally and excessively trained in hand-to-hand combat in order to ensure that even if bereft of any weapons, they never remain unarmed. During their novitiate years, each individual aspirant is encouraged to train in the various forms of combat until they and all their superiors discover that their talents fit one particular type, at which point they will dedicate their efforts to perfecting a specialization in it, thus providing the chapter with its various specialists. Those who cannot find a specific niche but excel in all fields in turn mold themselves into the role of the chapter's tactical marines. The only slight exception to this format of selection are the psychically gifted recruits who are guided into the library specialization, though beyond the specialization itself they are no different than the rest of their Battle Brothers and follow the same rank system that was described earlier. As the chapter is near constantly together, they deploy en masse to any conflict they dedicate themselves to. After which, if their operations necessitate their greater whole to separate, those of higher rank simply pick out the type and number of Battle Brothers they require for their task. Then,
they're always at full force. In more ways than one. They're always at full force. You will hear it as we continue on with the video. How is it that they maintain their numbers?
If their selection is not objected to by someone of higher standing, they pursue the given task with their signature zealotry. Thanks to their structure and each individual Astartes' high level of self-sufficiency, the chapter as a whole is very flexible and highly adaptive on the battlefield, despite the strict rigidity one might initially perceive from them. The biggest deviation, which in actuality is a violation of the codex, is the matter of their numbers. Officially, the chapter has only ever been at their full 1,000 marines strong at the time of their founding, but since, due to their excessive crusading, they have never been able to reach that complete state. However, kept far from the public knowledge is their reserve supply of neophytes, many of which have already received all of their augmentations save for the Black Carapace, numbering well in excess of a full chapter.
Do you hear that? Well in excess of a full chapter. Reserve neophytes.
Based on the latest estimates, the current Drakken Harbingers chapter officially fields almost 9 full companies of Astartes, with their scout company comprising only the 100 neophytes closest in line to undertake their final trial before being admitted to ascend to full battle brothers. While in addition to these numbers, another roughly 12.5 companies of neophytes are spread and hidden among the vast crew of their fleet as quote-unquote abhuman personnel, while they continue their various forms of training.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that I like the armor, this kind of green, dark green, kind of gold tint. It's quite nice actually. It looks royal in a way. Like Royal Guard, with the golden and the green. Yeah, it's quite nice.
Remarkably, the chapter has avoided censure and persecution for their strident quote-unquote malpractices, thanks to its deep ties to the Emperor's most holy Inquisition, as the earliest incarnations of the Drakken Harbingers pledged their service almost akin to an investment to the still-growing institution.
Basically, the Inquisition have their own private mercenary army of Astartes. Yeah, and they will do whatever means necessary to protect them, to support them, and in turn, the Drakken Harbingers will support and do whatever the Inquisition requires them to do.
While not fully submissive to it, as the chapter would on occasion hold disagreement with the wider Inquisition on individual matters, like for example the treatment of the Lamenters, a brother chapter whom the Drakken hold in the highest possible esteem. Similarly to the Black Templars, the Harbingers would work closely with any order that requested their aid and, most importantly, would not ask any questions beyond evidence of confirmation that the targets given to them were truly worthy of extermination. They would play the role of a weapon easy to access and happy to be used by the Inquisition, who in turn would humor and turn away the eyes of others from any perceived transgressions by the other branches of imperial government.
And I was surprised during the rejecting change honor over submission video, where Inquisitor Samuel Org of the Inquisition Ordo Hereticus, right? And Colarian, the Adeptus Custodes soldier, when they were discussing how the Inquisitor just told a lie with a straight face, and for some reason, Colarian, as a custodian, he did not realize or he did not recognize that, this Inquisitor is actually lying to him. When the custodian was asking Samuel, is there anything wrong with this chapter? Is there anything that you need to report about this chapter? Is there any sort of heresy or any sort of non-compliance that you need to discuss about? And Samuel's like, no, there's nothing wrong. Everything is okay. Everything is normal. We're just dealing with some xeno threats and some heretics here and there, but the chapter itself is sound, they're safe, they are compliant, which is a big lie. A very big lie, but for some reason the custodian could not detect that. I mean, this is a custodian. They're supposed to be able to analyze any sort of twitch coming from a mortal. But anyways.
While supporting their zealotry and presenting them as a perfectly codex-compliant chapter to the greater Imperium. It was through this close connection that the Drakken were gifted with their fortress ministry, the Vengaza, an imposing mobile star fortress comparable to the Raptorus Rex, integrated with a number of facilities capable of manufacturing the war gear the chapter needs.
It's nice being the favorite child of the Inquisition, isn't it?
Along with it, they were also quote-unquote gifted with a contingent of mechanicus that now permanently resides within their fleet, tasked with managing their vessels and facilities, while also training their tech marines and assisting the overall chapter with their smithing. A mere oath of fealty, however, was not enough to earn them all these gracious gifts. To ensure their continued loyalty and purity, the fleet of the Drakken Harbingers is always accompanied by an Inquisitor, along with their own personal retinue, or one assigned to them in the form of acolytes, agents of the Assassinorum, or other Astartes forces, such as the Death Watch, and on very rare occasions an individual from the Grey Knights. To further ensure that their duty is fulfilled as professionally as possible, these Inquisitors and their envoys are rotated out after every 10 standard years.
And you see, this is kind of like an issue for me. The fact that all of these different branches are, which are, I could say that they're under the Inquisition. You know, the official Assassinorum, I'm not entirely sure if they're under the Inquisition. But you know, like the Grey Knights, what are they called again? I forgot what they're called. Not the Black Shields. Okay, wait, let's just go back. She just said their name right now. Hold on.
By an Inquisitor, along with their own personal retinue, or one assigned to them in the form of acolytes, agents of the Assassinorum, or other Astartes forces, such as the Death Watch, and
yes, the Death Watch. Grey Knights, Death Watch, Assassinorum officials, and the Inquisition, of course. You know, all of these forces are sending representatives to watch over the Drakken Harbingers and making sure that they are not really compliant with the Codex Astartes, but to be loyal to the Inquisition. I just find that very concerning. You know, in terms of the Imperium of Man has this organization, the Inquisition, which is acting like its own miniature, you know, state that is adjacent to the High Lords of Terror and, to the rest of the Imperium of Man, where they have their own private army. Large private army. Let me also add that, because the Drakken Harbingers are more than 1,000 standing, Astartes. There are more than 1,000 of them. So they have their own private army, and the Adeptus Custodes are none the wiser of this kind of development. They are so focused on protecting the Emperor, protecting Terra, and that's all good, right? But when you have another organization that has got so much power accumulation, like the Inquisition, right next door, and you know nothing about this, I think that's a concern. I really do think that that's a concern. Because, the Inquisitors, yes, they are loyal to the Imperium of Man, but there can be some bad apples in there. They're not like custodians, where they've been genetically made to be loyal to the Emperor no matter what. No, they're human beings. They're like me and you. They can be compromised. They can be turned against us, And I don't know. I'm thinking that this type of accumulation of power can be abused by the Inquisition, and whoever is going to be in control of the Drakken Harbingers is going to use them for their own ends. And it might result in chaos on Terra, as there's many civil wars happening between Inquisitors, or it might also delve into the Imperial Palace, with the custodians, and now the Drakken Harbingers are infiltrating the capital city, or should I say the capital planet. They're attacking custodians, they're attacking other members of the Imperium of Man. This type of accumulation of power needs to be having an oversight over it. The High Lords of Terror need to oversight the Inquisition. They can't just not be answerable to nobody. Especially when they're able to, give so much resources to one chapter like this. That would be insane. That's just insane, really.
On very rare occasions, an individual from the Grey Knights. To further ensure that their duty is fulfilled as professionally as possible, these inquisitors and their envoys are rotated out after every 10 standard years.
But remember, guys, this is just a fan-made chapter. I just had to remind myself that right now. But I'm sure there are chapters out there that are supported by the Inquisition in this sort of way. In this sort of scenario, like the Drakken Harbingers, I'm sure. And that is still, a valid threat to the security of the Imperium of Man. Yeah, I just don't like the Inquisition in terms of how much power they have. I've stated this before in many videos as well, that I don't really like how is it that they have so much authority and power vested into them. And they have different sects of the Inquisition, and those sects also fight against each other whenever they have the opportunity or the reason to do so. So yeah, I just don't really like the mess that is the Inquisition.
Having such a presence among them was intended to keep the Sons of Vulcan on as tight of a leash as possible and to prevent any of their more questionable practices from seeding corruption among them. However, it has seemingly unintentionally provided them with several additional benefits for their chapter. Having such direct access to the Inquisition allows them to be fully transparent with their benefactors for the purpose of solidifying trust. It also ensures that their gene seed tithe is always provided precisely on time, reducing the suspicion about them. And not least of all, giving the Drakken access to a valuable diplomat for cases where their own sentiments may not yield productive results when it comes to negotiations and non-military endeavors. Compared to that of the Salamanders chapter, the gene seed of the Drakken Harbingers is roughly equally stable, bearing a couple of distinctions. Superficially, likely due to the millennia of no longer being exposed to Nocturne Star, their melanchrome organ is not as hyperactive, resulting in them appearing paler. Rather than charcoal black, the skin takes on a more ashen grey color, while the red glow in their eyes becomes more muted. Delving deeper, however, reveals a far more significant gene flaw, which results in a psychic phenomenon known to the chapter as the Abyssal Hate. This genetic deviation manifests in two ways, a passive and an active state. From the moment a suitable aspirant receives his first implants and long after ascending to a full battle brother, whenever he sleeps, he will very often be thrust into the memories of one of the original founders of the chapter, reliving important moments of their lives, most often the betrayal at Eastbound 5 and the deaths of Vulcan, as if
And this is the passive state of the gene seed.
they were his own. In addition to them, memories of his own traumatic experiences will also surface often, all of which practically constantly fills him with hatred. It is believed by the apothecaries and librarians of the chapter that this passive manifestation of the abyssal hate provides their numbers with an above-average resistance to the effects of the warp. Its more active
I remember Brother Varanier of the Drakken Harbingers when he was fighting against a word bearer wizard? No, not wizard. I can't say wizard. Warlock, maybe? Yeah. Psyker Warlock, yeah. He had a resistance to his Psyker abilities and he was able to push him back. The problem is that, the Abyssal Hate has a drawback. And we're about to hear that right now.
component reveals itself when an Astartes comes across something or someone that bears great resemblance to a cause of great trauma in his past. When triggered, the Marine's perception of the world around them becomes muted to the point where they cannot regard anything else but the object or person of their hatred, as they are consumed by a singular drive to slaughter and destroy whatever stirred the abyssal hate to manifest. When this occurs, the affected Marine's resistance to the warp drastically increases as the raw hatred pouring out of him overpowers other external psychic phenomena, and he becomes nearly completely immune to mental manipulation, able to stay on target even if it employs illusions to remove its presence, regardless if their source is psychic, mechanical or natural. The hate will only end after the target the Marine has focused on is destroyed, within hours after the target is physically removed beyond the Marine's natural perception, or if the Marine is slain.
And anyone who gets in his way will also suffer the same fate.
While holding some benefits, losing one's perception of the world around them can be a significant hindrance in most situations. Due to this, the warriors of the chapter focus excessively on discipline in an attempt to harness the abyssal hate only in moments opportune for it, but very few among them are able to achieve such results. At this point, being so ingrained into the chapter's genetic memory endows the abyssal hate with the added benefit of making their gene seed notably well quote-unquote protected from predation by traitor forces. Whenever any of the traitor Astarte is implanted into one of their enslaved aspirants, any breaking of their mind, be it by technology or sorcery, would be dispelled, replaced only with immediate raw hatred and hostility towards their captors, causing the aspirants to go berserk and attack the staff around them until they are put down, essentially robbing the traitors of a valuable recruit. Knowing of this effect makes the chapter's enemies less inclined to steal the gene seed of any warriors they fell, except for those who intend to use it as a means to double-cross other warbands by selling them quote-unquote faulty gene seed.
You know, this still surprises me that there is a gene seed market, where people buy and sell gene seeds that they've taken from killing their loyalist forces or from other traitor forces. And there's a marketplace for selling of these very specific organs, and yeah, I just find that quite interesting and a bit funny. Yeah.
Sentiment which, while profitable in the short term, risks the recipients of a bad deal to turn from rivals to fervent enemies. Seemingly in a way to actively foster the hate's propagation amongst their ranks, while also adhering to their protective nature towards mankind, however, their means of recruitment is one of the aspects in which they most often come to disagree with the Inquisition. At the conclusion of a campaign, be it in victory or defeat, the Drakken Harbingers will attempt to rescue as many civilians from invasions of their worlds as possible. Under the supervision of their inquisitorial representatives, they personally filter through all of the people now in their care for chaotic or Xenos corruption, depending on the foe that had attempted to claim the world in question. Those found pure of any such corruption become integrated as crew of their fleet, and it is from among these rescuees and their descendants that the chapter draws its recruits.
But what she's not telling us is that these civilians are not being taken back to their homeworld or not being taken to another a planet where they could call home. No, they are being kept on those ships. So basically they're being kidnapped. They're being kept there against their will. They will stay on those ships. They will make children, and those children will serve the Astartes. Those children will become Astartes as well. So this is a problem. Yes, you're protecting humanity, but you're also not allowing humanity their own free will to leave or to go to where they would think is a place of safety. You are just taking them like cattle and then keeping them in your pen, waiting for them to have children. But the Drakken Harbingers really are a self-sustained mobile fleet. They really don't need to head to any planet for any sort of regaining resources or any sort of upgrading of their armaments or anything like that. They have the Star Fortress or Star Forge in their possession. They have I don't know how many vessels do they have under their command, but hundreds of vessels, and they have a civilian population in these ships, which further maintain the numbers of the Drakken Harbingers. They're a community, self-enclosed community, self-sustainable community in space. and they're extremely mobile. No one is going to catch up to them. No one is going to, bring them to healed, or corner them into submission. There's no way, because they're self-sustainable, or self-sufficient, I should say, and they are extremely mobile with their fleets. They're not fixed on one location like a planet or a station orbiting a planet or somewhere in space, Yeah.
They pick from such traumatized populations to ensure that Vulcan's fire properly burns deep within them, enabling the aspirants to excise any flaws within themselves that their mortal frames have built around it, to then harness the Emperor's gift into an inextinguishable weapon over the course of their training and psycho-indoctrination. Once selected, an aspirant must go through a series of trials in order to, quote-unquote, earn his scales, as the elders of the chapter say, in reference to the ascending as a fully fledged battle brother. His first test takes place before any augmentation is applied to him, where he is stripped to modesty and locked in an arena with one opponent being a criminal or some other manner of treasonous lowlife per se, per the chapter's views. Then a single knife is thrown into the arena for the quicker of the two to claim, where the aspirant is expected to slay the lowlife. Upon receiving half of his augmentations and all of the training provided until then, the aspirant repeats this trial, except this time he is pitted against 9 opponents of similar work to the first, meant to symbolize the 9 traitor legions. He is equipped with a single knife and tasked to slaughter them, while the 9 are armed similarly or with other basic improvised weapons. Finally, when only the black carapace is left to be grafted onto his body, the now neophyte performs this ritual one last time, bereft of any armaments and...
I'm just wondering, if an aspirant dies at the hands of a criminal, what happens to that criminal? Are they given that opportunity to, live out their lives without suffering consequences as a criminal? I'm just wondering, what is the reward for those who are sent into these arenas to fight against these aspirants?
Only with his skin as armor against 18 opponents, as he is expected to cull twice as many traitors as himself once he fully ascends into the chapter, all of whom have had their pick among improvised weapons, knives, swords, solid slug pistols, minor chain weapons and sets of flak armor. Once again, the neophyte must destroy all of the dregs before himself, except this time he is prohibited from wielding any weapon and must accomplish the task with only his bare hands. Only after this final trial is completed does the neophyte become admitted to the procedure for the carapace, and when it too is completed, he is welcomed as a true Drakken Harbinger. Depending on the supply of opponents within the chapter's dungeons, many neophytes may not be able to attempt their trials until many years into the future, during which time they are relegated to continue their training and service among the crew of the fleet. However, there is one way for them to earn their scales, even when opponents for their trials are not available. If the neophyte is able to slay a traitor Astartes or banish a demon, be it on the battlefield as part of the chapter's overall deployed force, or in defense of boarding actions against their own vessels, as well as provide at least 2 witnesses who can confirm the feat, he will immediately advance ahead of all his fellow aspirants and be fully brought up into the chapter. Regarding the training of the chapter's new recruits, in some cases, if an aspirant proves himself as particularly noteworthy, a veteran or even a champion may decide to, figuratively speaking, take him under his wing and personally see to his training in order to hone whatever potential the elder Astartes may have found in such a protege. The last detail in regards to the chapter's function is the use of their librarians. Those Drakken Harbingers who possess psychic gifts specialize in pyromancy, similar to the salamanders of Nocturne, but also in purification, channeling Vulcan's fire to keep the halls, arenas, and souls of their domains uncorrupted, and divination, constantly reaching out and seeking distressed astropathic calls or omens pertaining to future conflicts, in order to help navigate that chapter towards new battlegrounds as quickly as possible.
Yeah, this I also find a bit interesting. That isn't that the job of the astropathic telepathica to deal with? Because they are the ones who are communicating with the rest of the galaxy's telepathic astropathic community, if I can say that. The fact that the librarians are taking that responsibility, it's also quite interesting. Because on a ship, you would have your navigator and you'd have your astrotelepathic, choir. And it is they who communicate with the rest of the galaxy. It is they who relay information back to those who are in command of the vessel. But it seems like the librarians in the Drakken Harbingers are doing that responsibility. So what are the astropaths doing then? What is their responsibility?
If not present as part of a campaign, the Drakken Harbingers will only ever cease their crusading around the galaxy in order to stop at secure worlds from which to replenish their stocks or raw materials and other supplies necessary for the extended void dwelling. As of the making of this report, they have not accepted any Primaris recruits into their ranks and have stubbornly refused the means through which to make them, seeing this new breed of Astartes as little better than an insult to their dedicated service throughout the millennia and to the Emperor himself. So far, they have only been spared the wrath of the Lord Regent Gilliman, thanks to the intervention and pleas from the branches of the Inquisition, who staunchly champion the Drakken's credited history and strive to negotiate some leniency towards them by placating the returned Primarch on behalf of the chapter. Their origins can be tracked back to the days of the Great Crusade and the Legion Praetor Agnaean Kazran, Drake-blooded, a young salamander inspired to follow the example of the Imperial Fist's first captain, Sigismund. His mindset and demeanor, along with those of his followers, were far more pragmatic, grim and abrasive than the rest of Vulcan's sons, resulting in them being slowly sidelined almost like pariahs within their legion. In admonishment of their brothers' views of them, they would paint segments of their armor in black, proudly standing by their sentiments rather than submitting to be cast in a mold they did not align with. Despite this, they still held close their role as protectors of the common people and had a deep love for their father, Vulcan. During the Dropside Massacre, Kazran and his forces would attempt to fight their way to their Genesire in order to protect him, but would instead arrive just in time to see his form engulfed by the unleashed missile salvo. It was with this final image burnt into their minds that they managed to fight their way back to their battle barge and flee from Eastvarn, along with the other loyalist elements that had done so. Unlike most of their contemporaries, Agnaean and the barely 2 companies left under his command would not scatter, but would instead make a dash towards Terra itself, as their protective nature overcame the desire for immediate vengeance, all the while falling deeper and deeper into their hatred towards the betrayers. Through what some of the future chapter would regard as an early manifestation of the abyssal hate, and to the surprise of those who would later arrive at the Siege of Terra, the small cadre of Marines had achieved a further deviation from their loyal cousins, namely that their voyage had barely been impeded by the ruin storm, as they were among the first of Eastvarn's survivors to arrive to the throne world.
I also kind of find that interesting that they were not affected by the ruin storm. It makes me suspect that the Chaos Gods might have a plan for them in the future. Because these Chaos Gods, like the Emperor playing 4D chess, there are many other players on the chessboard, and what if the Drakken Harbingers are one of those players that are going to be corrupted, and taken advantage of? And because they're being supported by the Inquisition, because they have all of these resources, because they have more than 1,000 Astartes under their banner, who knows? One of these days the Chaos Gods, whichever one it might be, or maybe it's Chaos Undivided, might just flip a switch and say, yes, it's time to use our Drakken Harbingers. It's possible. But maybe because of the abyssal hate, that's why they've been able to go through the ruin storm, quietly and seamlessly. But I like my first option, that they're going to be used by the Chaos Gods.
Immediately after their allegiance was verified, they joined the ranks in preparation for the coming siege, though their minuscule number would be drowned among the other defending forces within the pages of history. Despite not being acknowledged in the Imperium's records, their presence would render valuable aid, predominantly in the defense of Terra's civilian centers from the traitors' predations. discarding flamers in favor of plasma, melter, and volkite weaponry, a preference that persevered to the modern-day incarnation. Their fury on the battlefield would disrupt several key traitor operations via direct involvement by causing their enemies to misidentify them for Sigismund himself and his retinue on occasion. Over the course of the siege, they would develop a great respect for all their cousin legions who were present for Terra's defense, and a mild disdain for those who had arrived too late or failed to arrive at all for it, sentiments which they would carry with them throughout the millennia. Throughout the entire campaign, they would receive no information of Vulcan's resurrection and involvement on the planet, so the last piece of news they would learn of at the siege's conclusion would be of Sanguinius' death and the Emperor's fall. Utterly incensed by this, Khazran and his remnants would immediately surge to the stars in pursuit of the retreating traitors, ignoring any and all hails of patience from the recently arrived Ultramarines' fleet. Their drive for vengeance would be halted midway through the scouring, as their zealous assaults would result in almost all their number, their praetor among them, to be grievously wounded, necessitating their interment into restoration and subsequently stasis pods to facilitate their recovery. Their sleep would be disturbed thousands of years into the future, at the peak of the War of the Beast. Forgotten and only recently rediscovered, they would be given a cursory explanation of the current situation before being dispatched to assist a strike force of Blood Angels in retaking a world from Orcish occupation. A task that they eagerly dove into, due to the respect they held for the Sons of the Angel. Unfortunately, the expected battlefield had been different. Rather than the green-skinned Xenos, who had already been wiped out, the warriors of the Ninth were engaged against the traitor Astartes. Not wasting any time, Agnaeon and his salamanders charged with the matching zeal into the fray, which increased ever more when an astropathic message was sent to their battle barge informing them that Vulcan was indeed alive and en route to battle with the leader of the Orcs on a faraway world. Resistance was stiff, but eventually the traitors were overcome. Before any celebration could be had, the warriors of the 18th would relive Istvan V in miniature as their Blood Angels allies suddenly turned on them, screaming the name of the arch-traitor at the top of their lungs. Instead of breaking, however, the now more than battle-hardened salamanders fought back, their numbers further diminishing, but in the end, they came out victorious.
That must have been really awkward, though, to fight against those that you consider your brothers. You would be fighting with them, you would be shedding blood with them, and then all of a sudden, Horus! 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 Ah! Yeah, that's sad.
With the last of the angels slain, Khazran would order their flesh to be consumed so that he and his warriors would be able to glean their memories and understand whether new traitors had been revealed.
This has got to be one of the most disgusting abilities Astartes have. I don't know why the Emperor made them this way, really. Why can't he just give them the ability to read minds, or just to touch the body and to experience what, whatever this person has been going through, instead of eating their brain matter? Seriously. Ugh. Yuck.
Near instantly upon tasting the first drop of vitae, the warriors would succumb to deliberating mental pain as they learned not of treachery but of the Blood Angels' curses, and through them the fate of their father, experienced in such detail that it only compounded with their own sorrow at the loss of Vulcan. Once they recovered, all of them would swear to never speak about what they had learned to a soul, out of respect and admiration for their cousins, who still continued to serve loyally in spite of their condition. Finally done with this campaign, the company would rush towards where their Primarch had been rumored to be.
I'm just curious, won't the Blood Angels also want to know what happened to their forces that they sent to this planet to fight against the Chaos forces? Wouldn't they want to know? Wouldn't they want to ask the Drakken Harbingers, hey, you guys are okay, but where are our Astartes that we sent over?
But alas, once more they would arrive just in time to witness his demise as he threw himself and the beast into a reactor which then exploded. From then on, their hatred of the traitors, who had once again delayed them from reaching their father's side, increased and solidified even further in their collective psyche. At the war's conclusion, when the Salamanders chapter attempted to reintegrate them within itself, the task would prove impossible, as Aghanean's forces had changed far too much to mingle among them, considering these newly uplifted brothers as weak and incorrect of their interpretation of Vulcan's teachings. Due to this divide, they would be sequestered into a separate founding of their very own chapter, the Drakken Harbingers. Later on, they would willingly step in service to the forming Inquisition, as it could provide ample leads and targets for their craving to slay the enemies of man, and insisting in maintaining their methods of doing so away from more prying eyes devoted to the likes of the Codex Astartes. To the Drakken, paradoxically enough, the wisdom and very existence of that tome would be regarded with notable contempt, which would extend towards the sons of its author, particularly after learning that Rebooter Gilliman had created and enforced its adoption against the will of his brother Vulcan. From the spite roused by this news, they to this day refuse to become one of the quote-unquote late ones chapters, instead adamant
Not last one, but late one, yeah.
Retaining their identity as the Lord of Drake's legionaries. Because of their abrasive nature, the Drakken Harbingers have not been among the most popular chapters in the eyes of other Astartes, a sentiment that is not aided by another of their paradoxical aspects, holding great respect for fellow Marines who have at times come to the brink of falling from grace but persevered and remained loyal to their duty to the Emperor and the Imperium. In spite of the grating details, however, those who fight and bleed alongside them more often than not remain as proud allies who can be certain that they will always have still truly noble sons of Vulcan as their support, even if the universe itself were to turn against them. It is by this virtue that chapters such as the Black Templars, Sanguinary Crusaders, Dawn's Crusaders, Mantis Warriors, White Scars, Flesh Tearers, Black Dragons, and particularly the Lamenters are considered as brother chapters by the Drakken. And
yeah, of course, all of the questionable questionable chapters, questionable, actions by the chapters, those that are considered to be loyal, of course, they'll all be clumped up together as good buddies, as good friends, because they are considered to be the weird ones. They are the weird ones, They're the ones who do things that are just not the same like other Astartes or other chapters. And, yeah, it's understandable why they would see them as friends, or they would see them as allies, and not other chapters, especially those that are sired, or should I say, those that come from the Ultramarines and the late ones, progeny, if I can say that. So yeah, the misfits, the confused ones, the misunderstood ones in terms of the chapters, of course, the Drakken Harbingers would feel right at home with them because of their past, because of what they're going through, and the fact that they're also loyal. They see much more of a relation with those chapters compared to the normal, boring, codex compliant chapters. Yeah.
an honor that they rarely extend and even deny to their Jane brethren in the Salamanders. Given the formally listed chapters, one might have expected to find the Space Wolves as part of their closest brethren as well. However, in reality, the two chapters hold a severe and vehement loathing for each other.
Well, we also have to remember that Lehman Russ with these Space Wolves left Terra. I think they're going to discuss about this. They left Terra fighting against Horus Lupercal, and they went there for the final defense of Terra. And when that entire conflict was over, they came too late, just like the Ultramarines. So yeah.
The Sons of Russ consider the Drakken as mewling and honorless dogs on the Inquisition's leash that tarnish the Lord of Drake's name and memory. Conversely, those of Vulcan scorn the Wolves and their Primarch for abandoning Terra in a vain hounding of glory, where if they had instead humbled themselves and remained, the Emperor would have likely not suffered his current fate, as the siege would have been broken far quicker and easier.
Maybe.
Contrary to the open admiration of the above-mentioned bloodlines, descendants of the other loyalist Primarchs start off on a shakier ground and would need to earn the Drakken's respect if they wanted it. To the chapter, the Sons of the Gorgon are looked upon with pity and disgust, as their quote-unquote techno-fetishism goes against the principle of Ferris manners, which the Harbingers believe to have learned from their ancestors' memories relived through their gene seed. Those of the Lion,
The flesh is weak, but deeds endure,
and the Raven are viewed with the most neutrality, the exception being Corex's apparent descendants in the Carcharodon's Astra. At a first glance, and given the friendship of the Drakken, the Carcharodons may seem as a chapter they would hold in high esteem, but their utter disregard and almost disdain for the common people of the Imperium rouses only revulsion, as, in the end, the vengeful Drakes are sons of Vulcan at their core. Because of the same reason, they also hold in utter contempt the likes of the Marines Malevolent and the Minotaurs, though for the latter there are also the factors of the brutalization of the Lamenters and their propensity for the theft of other chapters' relics, a trait that has also pointed the Harbinger's ire towards the Blood Ravens. And, lastly, there is one final unifying factor among all three of these chapters, namely that, to the Drakken, all three are considered to be Ultramarine descendants. From their belief that there is no natural traitor blood among the Adeptus Astartes and their disdain for the Sons of Guilliman, the chapter considers any other faulty and or treasonous Marines with unknown lineage to trace their roots back to Macragge. Certain inquisitors have even heard some of the vengeful Drake state with absolute certitude that the Astral Claws must have been Ultramarines' descendants, since it was the Ultramarines who had the most successes turn against the Imperium and the Emperor. A statement mainly correct on a technicality, given how Guilliman's progeny side the most successor chapters out of all the legions.
Don't cast aspersions if you can't back it up. Don't cast aspersions if you have no proof to back it up. I mean, this is unbecoming of an Astartes.
Regardless, the Drakken Harbingers continue to faithfully serve the Golden Throne and the Imperium. They would patrol the galaxy at large, not knowing where the enemies of mankind would crop up next, but now, ever since the opening of the Great Rift, the scum made themselves known. Thus now, both as a quiet means of protest and having a more defined hunting ground present, they instead dive headlong into Imperium Nihilus, their efforts of doing so made with close to no hindrances thanks to the abyssal hate, similarly to their ancestors' dash through the Ruinstorm, hot on the heels of any heretic, mutant and Xenus that would...
So, yeah, okay, this is very important. I don't think I heard this one yesterday properly. Because the only way that you can go through the Great Rift or the only way you can get through the wall, right, is through the Cicatrix Maledictum. The what do they call it? The gauntlet, the Moklut. What Moklut? What is it called? But it's a narrow corridor passageway from entering from Imperius Sanctus into Imperium Nihilus. So are you telling me that the Drakken Harbingers are able just to go through the wall without being affected by the warp storms that are raging, that have cut the galaxy into two parts? I'm just wondering about that. Are their abilities of the Abyssal Hate really that powerful that they're able just to traverse from Imperium Sanctus into Imperium Nihilus without going through the Moknud? What, the gauntlet? Yeah. Oh gosh. I'm just wondering about that. Okay.
Dare think the remnants of mankind beyond the rift, abandoned and ripe for the picking. Where the light of the Astronomicon may be missing, they blaze forth as Vulcan's flame was intended to do, heralding hope, fervor, and zeal to humanity, alongside doom, purification, and annihilation to their enemies in the darkness. Indiscriminate in their crusade, the Drakken Harbingers still dedicate notable effort in tracking down the whereabouts of and snuffing out certain specific foes that have personally scorned the chapter in the past, such as the Knights of Leren, who were responsible for the death of Praetor Orokin Dovehart at the turn of the millennium, and the Brotherhood of Woe, whose Iron Warrior Master of War, Harkon, used the Sons of Vulcan in his scheme to shed Abaddon's shackles on his warband by throwing the Black Legion forces imposed upon him at the Drakken so that they could be exterminated. At the conclusion of which, he humiliated the newly elected praetor Victor Draketalon by immobilizing his armor, gloating to him of his machinations and finally thanking him for the job well done by leaving him with a bag of skulls and helmets belonging to his salamanders victims from the Dropside massacre, before leaving him to be later found by his squad. From this shame, the young praetor would rouse his wellspring of hatred and faith, through which he would mold himself to better fit his appointed position and lead the Drakken to save multitudes of worlds beyond the Astronomican's light, as the remains of their ancestors were interred into the Venganza scripts, as to find peace and spirituality aid their brothers in their pursuit of vengeance. In the decades since the split of the galaxy, the chapter would only ever make brief returns to Imperium Sanctus in order to swap out their inquisitorial oversight, resupplying if necessary, and deliver particular cargo to Imperial agents, most often members of the Inquisition, namely the skulls, helmets, standards, artifacts and others belonging to the leaders of traitor or Xenos organizations, which the Harbingers had exterminated over the course of their dive into the void, as proof of their service and efficacy. Upon their return from their latest crusading expedition, however, they would bring back a rather disturbing bounty. A chest filled with power armor helmets bearing renegade markings, some of which had clearly been warped by the taint of chaos, all of
Why are you bringing that back? You should be destroying that.
which were of Mark 10. While the Inquisitor that had accompanied them at the time would be interviewed separately, when the Drakken Harbingers were asked to clarify what had transpired in the expedition beyond the Great Rift, the now far more seasoned Praetor Victor would give a single statement in answer before their forces left the premises with their new inquisitorial staff and dove once more to cleanse their creator's domain. When used correctly, the Emperor's gift is more than sufficient enough.
Wow. Yes, guys, that is it with Homebrew of the Week, episode 284, Drakken Harbingers, made on the 40k Theories YouTube channel. And this was a request from Helldrake77777. The Drakken Harbingers are not codex compliant. However, the Inquisition, see them as their baby. See them as their resource, a very key and important resource to their operations across the galaxy. So they are willing to turn a blind eye. They are willing to reinforce them, give them resources that they need to continue the Inquisition's bidding, if I can say that. And they have a perfect working partnership with the Inquisition. They have a self-sustained, self-enclosed battle barge, or should I say space fleet, that is mobile, that is not fixed on a planet or a station. They are, self-sufficient in terms of their armaments. They have their own personal or private mechanicus, adepts maintaining their technology, that are also training their own tech marines. So really, they don't need to answer to anybody, in terms of the Imperium of Man. They don't need to go to Terra to petition for requisition of more resources, or go to Mars requisition for more tech priests. They don't need to do any of these type of administrative working requirements for their for their chapter to continue to exist. You know, they are self-sustained. They have everything they need. In terms of the gene seeds, they also have like almost instant communication with the Inquisition, because there's an Inquisitor on board who makes sure that they are compliant in terms of giving reports back to Terra about this chapter and the gene seeds they have in their possession. So really, everything is made easy for this chapter to survive, to thrive, and they are well supported by the state, by the shadow state, if I can say that, because the Inquisition is like a shadow state. They are a power upon themselves, and they don't need to answer to the High Lords of Terra. They don't really need to answer to Rubute Gilliman. They can do as they please, and they have the access to do it. So yeah, the Drakken Harbingers are well funded, well organized. They do have their genetic abnormality in terms of the abyssal hate. I don't know if the Inquisition know about this abnormality. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, they share something similar to what the Blood Angels have, in terms of the Black Rage. And, they see other Astartes that are giving off this posture, this posture of, being the good guys, or being, Astartes that follow the Adeptus Custodes, being Astartes that have got no blemish on their record, no blemish in their reports. They are the perfect Astartes. They have an issue with Astartes who present themselves that way. They're far more related to ones that are complicated, misfits, Astartes that are straggling the lines between being loyal or not loyal, and who are also not codex compliant like them. They far more attuned to Astartes that are, just very edgy compared to everybody else. So yeah, they like those types of Astartes. They like their type of company around them. And Astartes that are like the Ultramarines, and the Ultramarines other successor chapters, they just see them as a weakling nuisance, and they just follow the last one's orders, and they are useless dogs that are being kept by Primarch Rubute Gilliman. So yeah, they don't really have a fond light or experience with other loyalist forces, unless of course they are complicated, or they have a complicated past, just like the Drakken Harbingers. And yeah, their armor set is quite nice with the greenish color and the golden paint. Or is it black? I think it's green though. I think it's green, because the Astartes I saw here in the images, they look kind of green with black, green with gold, tint, or paint on it as well. So I'm not entirely sure whether it's black and gold, or is it green and gold. But yeah, the chapter itself, like I said before, in terms of their sustainability, is also continued by the fact that they get refugees from different planets, and they keep them on board their vessel, and they create a human force aboard their vessels that are able to serve aboard their vessels, and also have children, and those children become possible candidates for the Drakken Harbingers, or other forms of menial tasks that are required to maintain the fleet. So yeah, they help humans, but it's also to their own benefit, not necessarily to the benefit of those who have been saved. No. If you've been saved by the Drakken Harbingers, there's a highly likely chance that you will be with them forever. You're not going to go to another planet. You're not going to go back to your home planet if it's been secured. No, you're staying with them. You're staying with them, and who knows what will happen to you there, but you won't be killed. I don't think so. You won't be tortured, but you will be serving them for the rest of your life. Yeah, essentially. But yeah, this is it. This is it with the Homebrew of the Week episode 284. Remember, guys, if you want to check out the original video as well as Homebrew of the Week episode 284, Drakken Harbingers, the links are going to be in the description below for Warhammer 40k Theories YouTube channel as well as the video. You'll find the links in the description below. And thanks again to Helldrake77777 for the request. It's been really good, and now I'm complete with the double hitter that has been requested by Helldrake. And hopefully this time I'm gonna double check that the sound is actually on, because I've been watching on OBS just to check if the sound is actually working, and it has been working. So hopefully throughout the entire video it's fine. Yeah, okay, this is it. Remember, guys, if you like my reaction, give it a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. Click on the notification bell if you want to be up to date with my latest videos. And that is it. Bye bye.